This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. I'm Jamie Bogner. This is the Craft Beer and Brewing podcast, and this week's episode is a panel discussion I recorded live on stage at the Alberta Craft Brewing Convention in Red Deer, Alberta, back in early October. The thematic through line is farm to glass brewing in the province, and that's apropos since a lot of the malt North American brewers use in their beer is grown in the province. The proximity of brewers to malt growers and maltsters there feels a little bit like being at Single Hill or Bale Breaker or Varietal in the Yakima Valley. That closeness breeds creative projects and interactions that don't happen just anywhere. And we talk about a few of those over the course of this discussion. Joining me in the conversation are three award-winning brewers who represent different corners of the craft beer industry in Alberta. Chelsea Tessier of Polyrhythm Brewing up in Edmonton, Jen Rogers of Wild Winds on the north side of Calgary and Bridgeland, and Sarah McCambridge of Blindman Brewing in Lacombe, just north of Red Deer. We talk about the agricultural side, of course, because this is the Craft Beer and Brewing podcast, and it wouldn't be an episode if we didn't also talk about agriculture. But we also talk about interesting collaborative projects, malt freshness, unique processes, beers that tap into different angles of malt flavor, and a whole lot more. Before we get into the conversation, for years, G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across North America and beyond. They're proud of the cool partnerships they've built over the past 30 years because brewing doesn't stop at 5 o'clock, and nor do they. They use quality components, expert craftsmanship, and constant innovation. With their 24/7 service and support, your brewery will never stop. Remote monitor your chiller for simple and fast access to all of the information you need and gain peace of mind that your operation is running smoothly. And brewers, what if your yeast could do more than just ferment? With Berkeley Yeast, it can. They bioengineer ordinary strains and make them extraordinary, enhancing the flavors you want and eliminating the ones you don't. Now, in addition to competitive pricing, they're offering free overnight shipping on 5+ barrel pitches. Try it out. If you don't love it, they'll happily refund you. So why settle for ordinary when you can brew with better yeast? Visit berkeleyyeast.com to learn more and start brewing with science on your side. Also, as breweries expand beyond beer into other segments like mocktails and CBD beverages, Old Orchard is here to help. They can formulate custom blends featuring specialty ingredients. Whether trending flavor additions or nostalgic favorites, the next best thing is around the corner at Old Orchard. More information and free samples are waiting at oldorchard.com/brewer. That's oldorchard.com/brewer.
Welcome everyone to Grain and Glass Session, which is a live recording of the Craft Beer Magazine podcast. Today's session brings together some of Alberta's most thoughtful and talented voices in brewing, people who turn raw ingredients and big ideas into beers that define our scene. Hosting today's conversation is Jamie Bogner, co-founder and editorial director of Craft Beer and Brewing magazine. Jamie spent years digging into what makes breweries tick, from recipe development to business strategy to the culture that holds it all together. He's one of the best in the business at finding the why behind the beer, and we're lucky to have him leading the discussion. Our first panelist is Chelsea Tessier, co-owner and head brewer at Polyrhythm Brewing in Edmonton. With a background in microbiology and exotoxicology, got it, nailed it, Chelsea turned her love of homebrewing into a thriving business. Next up is Jen Rogers, co-owner, brewer, and chief awesome officer at Wild Winds Brewery. Jen is the definition of hands-on. From brewing and sales to design, bookkeeping, and social media, she's involved in every part of building the business from the ground up. Rounding out the panel, Sarah McCambridge from Blindman Brewing. Sarah joined Blindman in 2020 and earned her brewmaster and brewery operations certificate the following year. She's since become an integral part of the team, helping shape some of Alberta's most consistently excellent beers. All right, that's it for me. Take it away, guys.
For folks that are here in the room, some of this may be remedial for you all, some of this, but we're also recording this conversation, sharing it out there with our audience of brewers that are listening from around the world. And so the thought behind this panel is to talk about the ways that Alberta brewers work in such close connection to the agriculture of Alberta. It's an interesting subject for me when I go to, say, the Pacific Northwest hop growing regions and talk to the brewers like Varietal and Single Hill and some of the Portland breweries, about how they brew with hops, fresh hops in particular, that are a product of the land all around them and the farms all around them. You get an interesting perspective on what's possible. So looking at those innovative methods in which brewers who are close to ingredients used in brewing use those is always interesting. And so through the course of this conversation, because Alberta is such a large grain producer and malt producer, as well as grain producer, we're going to have this conversation from a brewer's perspective of how brewers in Alberta work very closely with both barley growers and maltsters to make beer in interesting and in-depth ways. And I guess maybe we just start off with kind of a broad look at that. And maybe Sarah, you can start us off talking about this because you work both with a maltster and with your brewery yourself. When you look at this big picture, explain the levels of activity that are here. We've got brewers, we have barley growers, you have some growers who also malt some of what they grow. You have some growers that are growing for themselves, but also selling to other large maltsters. And so it's an interesting, picture of people producing barley, making malts, and then working directly with brewers.
What's the question and all of that? So we're really lucky. When I came out of school, I went straight to a well-established brewery that was very happy to shape how we work our recipes and the land around us. And they really wanted us to make sure that we were using what we had locally. And there was never any question about what we would be encouraged to produce. A couple of years in, I was working on the test batch system, so of smaller trials of things, and that eventually sometimes did make it onto the big system. But for the most part, we're here to produce something for an experience for our taproom friends. But when I started working the recipes for Red Shed, it was very easy. Their examples are easy to put into a classic example of any Pilsner or Vienna lagers or any of those sort of things. So very easy to put those forward and showcase what they are.
Let's talk about who some of the big malt growers and maltsters are here in Alberta. What are some of the big folks that you all use to supply malt?
Red Shed, Hogarth, RAR. We have used Origin in the past, but we're lucky that it's all right here. Almost all of our, let's say 85% of what we bring in is Alberta.
And Canada Malting as well. It's just down the street from where I work.
Canada Malting? Sure. Are there any other maltsters that you all buy from here in the province?
I use Hammer Malt. They're in Westlock, so they're about half an hour away from our brewery.
Let's try to think about it from a creative perspective. As you are evaluating malt here from maltsters in Alberta, as you're thinking about whether that is taking an existing beer or creating a new beer and building the idea of what malt is going to do in that, how do you start creatively from that? Do you have a process for testing and tasting? Do you look at other samples? Do you look at, say, specs that those maltsters provide to you? Especially with some of the smaller maltsters, there's going to be some potential variability in that. It's a agricultural product, and so there's some variability. How do you then start thinking about the creative process of designing recipes around local malt?
I can just speak to what I do. I typically always first start with BJCP and their guidelines. They typically give you a breakdown of the types of malts that are used, and then I kind of just go from there. Obviously for me, I've always tried to use local malts where I can. Because I contract brew, I typically use what is in-house, but I'm happy to purchase other things outside of what they provide. But for me, even I just did an amber lager. I use RAR and Red Shed with some specialty malts. But then I also did a Belgian double with origins, exact replication of the other malts as well. And just using those as the base and then creating the difference profile by just adding Belgian candy syrup and Belgian yeast completely transformed the beer. But I feel like malt is the backbone of any beer, and I'm a very malt-forward brewer. So I take pride in using all the local malts that we have to offer here in Alberta.
For us, we make a lot of hazy IPA, and I kind of take a different approach where I want to try out the malts. And so I'll use either like Red Shed Pilsner as the base, or Hogarth Pilsner, or Hammer Pilsner, or Rar Pilsner, or mix with two-row. And then we'll do blind hop trials to select hops that go best with that base malt. And it makes a really big difference when you're doing that. The same hop can taste totally different with one Pilsner malt to the other.
Well, you're going to have to tell me more about that, because I have heard other brewers mention that, and matching base malt to hops. From your, as you're doing that, what are some of the things you look for in terms of what makes it work and what doesn't work? Are there hops that lean towards different malts, and why does that happen?
Well, I've noticed that it just depends on the hop lot as well. Can we do it all blind? So something that's grassy might work best with one hop that doesn't work in the other. Even alcohol strength, I've noticed that some hops will make it taste like more alcohol forward, which is really interesting. But it's all blind, and then we just look at it after, but choose based on that.
Interesting. How do you all go about a process of learning and locking in malt flavor and that contribution in your own recipe design brains? Trying to understand what, are you tasting malt, of course? Do you use steeping process? Do you use other kinds of methods to understand what of that flavor, that you might chew, is actually going to make it into finished beer? Are there some processes to feed that creative side of your brains?
Homebrewing.
I think the maltsters do a really good job of also providing a lot of the sensory profiles. Like, they do their own sensory aspect. And that's one of the things that I've always used as a guideline. I use what they provide as a basis for creating all of my recipes. They've done a lot of the hard work and the research to understand what brings what their malt provides in flavor, aroma, what it does for the beer, its body, its head retention. And lucky for us, Aaron and Joe have both been brewers, so they know exactly what we need in our malts. So that's fantastic that we have that option to go to these guys for assistance.
And, with them just being down the road too, if they have ever come out with anything new that we haven't tried before, it's easy to get a sample. Almost always, it's no big deal for us to get a bag of whatever has come out and use it, and potentially up what your efficiency or your brew house efficiency is, or adjust that a little bit just for our test batch. But otherwise, they perform almost exactly how you expect them to every time. They have done all of the hard work, done steep tests and all those things, so that we know exactly what to expect. The specs are the same that you would get from a big supplier.
Every brewery has some core brands that they make consistently. Have you gone through a process of moving malt over to a different malt on a beer that you're familiar with? And, is there a process that you've gone through to do that?
So, Blyman definitely had to. In the last couple of years, we moved away from getting Wireman's Carafoam for a lot of supply chain issues and cost. And luckily, Aaron was able to produce the chit malt that we swapped over. We did do a test batch and put it in our tap room, and we had all of those regulars that come in and know that brand very well, and didn't necessarily do a blind taste test on them. We didn't want to trick them, but we let them know we were having to make a change of our malt, and we're very honest about it, and it's been very well received. A few fine tuning, but basically swapped it in like we would have just bag for bag, no problem.
We'll be back with more in a second, but first, give your customers a pleasant surprise with Audacia in your next IPA. Brought to you by Indie Hops, this descendant of Strata brings their own flair of catchy lilac and lavender aromas and flavors of sweet tart berries and tangy lychee. Audacia loves family reunions with Strata and has even more fun when Citra Simcoe, Amarillo, and others join the party. Let Audacia loose and watch the smiles spread. Indie Hop's life is short. Let's make it flavorful. And looking for a powerful no-rinse sanitizer that gets the job done fast? Meet SaniClean PAA Pro from 5 Star Chemicals. The EPA-registered PAA-based acid sanitizer is tough on beer stone and perfect for everything from kegs to packaging lines. Available in 2 convenient sizes, it's ideal for coarse sprayers, fermenters, and more. Trusted by pros, designed for performance, SaniClean PAA Pro helps you brew with confidence. Learn more at 5starchemicals.com. Brew better, brew with 5 Star. Also, this episode is sponsored by PakTech, delivering craft beer multi-packing you can trust. PakTech's handles are made with 100% recycled plastic and are fully recyclable, helping breweries close the loop and advance the circular economy. With a minimalist design, durable functionality you can rely on, and custom color matching, PakTech helps brands stand out while staying sustainable. Trusted by craft brewers nationwide, they offer a smarter, sustainable way to carry your beer. To learn more, visit paktech-opi.com. That's paktech-opi.com.
Chelsea, I'm thinking about your hazy IPA dry hopping again. So you are, when you brew this beer and then you'll do a dry hop test with that malt and then match dry hops to complement the malt.
Yeah, kind of taking this from last year's conference and Mike Foniak.
Sheesh.
Explaining the process that they do there and adapting it to what we started doing. And yeah, so just brewing the beer and filling growlers up with a specific dosage for the hop, and then doing so I label all the growlers on the bottom, and myself and Taylor will go through all the hops and blend everything and then choose based on that. So
how do you work in the other direction and then choose different base malt, if you want to complement certain dry hops that you might want to use in a beer?
So like our core beers, I guess. And we did make a switch to our core beer and switched from our premium pills to hammer malt because we were also chasing that super pale color, and the raw premium pills was a higher color than the 2-row at one point. So we decided to make that switch. It's a local farmer that would always come to homebrew meetings and just really wanted to support him. He also sells chit malt, so we wanted to get that in. So we did make that switch, and a funny story was I didn't realize that he was bagging in 22.7 kilogram bags instead of 25 kilogram bags. And so our hazy IPA turned into a hazy pale ale that we now keep around. But yeah, it was a similar malt profile, a little bit grassy, but I don't mind that when it's complemented by like more of a pineapple citrus hop. It kind of works out nicely. And
so pineapple citrus hop, these are your mosaic base malt then?
Citra, Mosaic, Sultana.
Okay. And then are there other hop combinations that take you into a different malt base and specific hops?
Yeah, we have our mixtape that we use. We use Azaka, Simcoe, and Strata. That's a little bit more like West Coast hops. And we use a little bit of Kananaskis, which is a light Munich malt from Red Shed. So a little bit more malty, and a little bit of bittering hops in that one, which we don't bitter any of our other hazies.
Well, somehow we're talking about malt, but then we ended up talking about IPA, even if we're talking about malt, which is okay because IPA is a popular style in this. But let's talk about some other malt projects, and I guess we should back up and also share for the audience out there listening that Alberta also has a category within the competition, that specifically for beers made with Alberta-grown ingredients in order to highlight this. And so there's also an incentive to create these collaborative projects between brewers and growers to celebrate these ingredients. Jen, is there a project that you've worked on with Alberta Craft Malt in particular, that has been really exciting for you to showcase the possibility of malt from here in Alberta?
For sure. I've got a couple of beers that typically use all Alberta malt. Our German Munich Helles Lager uses raw and red shed. It won gold at Canada Beer Cup last year for pale malty European lager.
Yeah.
And then recently we did a collab with Red Shed and Hogarth. It's an all Alberta malt Kolsch. It was also our Pink Boots brew, so I love the sense of community that is in this Alberta in our hometown. Red Shed kindly donated some merch and some kickbacks to our Pink Boots launch party. Hogarth donated the malt for it. So really just giving back to the community and really just supporting what we're doing. And obviously we're proud to showcase Alberta malt. Like, our win is their win. So like, we wouldn't be able to make great beer without great ingredients, and they do a great job of what they do. So
Great. It's talk to me about the malt flavor. Or, is there some range of terroir? Obviously, Alberta is a big place. There's different malts grown in different places throughout the province. In terms of range of flavor from some of these maltsters, do they have different kind of house flavors based on where they're grown that you all have identified? Or
I love so Hogarth does a melony malt. It's nothing like I've ever had before. It's a type of melanoided malt, but it's got this like tangy fruit tartness, and I use it in our saison, and it's just very unique, and nobody does anything like it. So yeah, there's a lot of unique characteristics in the malt that we can produce here in Alberta, and obviously with the smaller maltsters, they can get really creative with the profiles that they're creating in the malt.
Do y'all do brewing tests where you brew a similar recipe or the same recipe with different malts from different maltsters in order to kind of tease out some of the flavors that are possible within these malts?
Well, sometimes with a test batch, we can use whatever we have, and if we don't have what we can get from Red Shed or vice versa with Hogarth, they just seem to slide right in. A little bit different, sweeter, like nuttier. Generally, our base malt is a raw product, but like when you have a smaller scale, you can get away with using a few extra bags of a base malt from one of the more craft style maltsters. But I don't know if I've noticed in terms of where they're growing, if that's come through different in the finished product.
One of the other things that you have the benefit of working so closely with maltsters that are all around you is thinking about customizing malts, or also, getting very fresh specialty malts. It's certainly, as we get into more roasty malts, freshness, more and more brewers are talking about how impactful that idea of freshness is. Do you have some examples of using some highly kilned and roasted malts, and some examples of how working closely with Alberta growers and maltsters has impacted that?
One of our favorite malts to use in our brown ale is a wood-fired chocolate malt, which hammer malt doesn't like make anymore, but they will make it if you ask very nicely. It's a lot of work. But it's really cool. It's really chocolatey, and you get that small hint of smoke, which you can't detect unless you're looking for it. So it kind of just adds that nuance. And we have I brought a couple here too, but the brown malts and biscuit malt from Red Shed are some of my favorites. And
we have some props down here, but we don't have a table, so it's going to be hard to taste some of these while we go. And anyone who's just listening out there is going to have to imagine that we're doing these things.
Yeah, well, like in terms of fresh malts, we not very often, but like often we'll be needing something, and we'll just call up Joe, or Shane will give Joe a call, and we'll have that the next day, or he'll plan to bag it for us. Like it's like on call. It's like on tap for us. Like, you don't have to worry about freshness with them. We don't have to get huge amounts of it in our brewery and hold on to it, because they are so easy to work with in terms of getting what we need a week out, the same week. There's been times when I've called my husband and I'm like, can you bring this? And he also works at Red Shed, and he works at Blyman, and I will be, by the end of the day, have the free bags of malt that I need at the brewery for the next day. So it's certainly a service that we use.
How much variability do you see within a season or from season to season, especially with some of the smaller craft maltsters that you use? And then talk to me about your process of, reading those COAs or understanding what's coming to you, and then how you go about adjusting, some of the recipes, that you use with these malts.
I noticed this year, Hogarth's Pilsner was a smaller kernel, so having to adjust the grist and just being aware of that. With Red Shed, they kept, they held back some of their barley from previous growing seasons that were better. We've had a lot of drought season in Alberta the last couple of years. So that did help a lot with consistency. So that is a huge benefit to be able to have that.
With smaller kernels, mean adjusting the mill so that you've got the right crush on all of that.
Yeah, we didn't see that with Red Shed because they held back their barley, so it was consistent throughout the last couple of years.
Are there other key data points that you all take a look at as that malt is coming in, that drives some of your adjustments on certain beers?
I think the maltsters are really good at letting us know if there's any deficiencies or deterrences from what was previously given to us on a COA. So my recipe calculation is based on that information that they provide. So if it changes, I just update that going forward. But it's not typically like a huge change in recipe development. So.
We normally get like the heads up from our production manager if he's concerned about anything, and we'll make an adjustment. But the other thing is that if you do day-over-day brewing, you could adjust when and blend, which is what a lot of our brewing is.
And when we were prepping for this, you mentioned that some of the Hogarth in particular marks extract potential rather than weight. I thought that was an interesting way of selling malt.
Yeah, so I guess adjusting your water ratio a little bit as you're doing that is important. But it is really cool that you know that when you put this amount, you're going to get that amount. So they, I asked them yesterday, they packed their bags to 82% potential efficiency.
Let's talk about using Alberta malt in specific beer styles. And maybe we'll start by talking about, European style lagers. Most brewers are brewing more of those these days. The cost of importing and the energy consumption involved in bringing malt from Europe into North America. More and more maltsters in North America are finding ways, and growers are finding ways to grow barley that hits some of the specs of European malt that we all love. Talk about some of the ways that you have thought about taking some European sourced barley out and finding new ways to work with maltsters in Alberta to fill some of those gaps.
We've never imported base malt. We've always just used Alberta, so we base the recipes solely on what we have available here.
When I was first developing the recipe for our Munich Helles lager, I was kind of reading up on German malt and kind of what the characteristics of that malt was. It definitely had a little bit more of a nutty, toasted biscuit notes to it. And when comparing what I was reading about Alberta Pilsner malt, it was a little bit more honey, malty sweetness. So I complemented that Pilsner malt with some of Red Shed's Munich, Kananaskis, and biscuit to give the characteristics I wanted in the finished product for the Helles. So,
and when I would do the small scale test batch at Blyman, I generally look at designing great beers, read about exactly what the targets should be, and then I look to see what I can get from Alberta, and I automatically just go for those ones. Generally, we have that in our in-house anyways, but it's normally you just I tend to just swap out whatever I can for something that I can find in our backyard.
You just mentioned blending some malts, and I think that's something that more of you do in terms of dialing in the exact kind of profile. Talk to me about that. Chelsea, you've mentioned to me that you have 4 different Pils malts in the brewery that you use combinations of to achieve different goals.
Yeah, so I'll often also blend in Rarturo if I'm just looking for a little bit more of a neutral flavor, but I still want a light color. Then I'll blend in Pilsner with the Turo. But every single Pilsner malt just gives a little bit of a different characteristic. And I also love supporting all the maltsters. So I got to bring them all in.
How do you, think about this in a creative sense? Well, this, 25% of this Pilsner malt is going to bring a little bit of this, and 25% of this one is going to bring some of that. I'm just curious about that.
I think just trying things out, and homebrewing. Like I started homebrewing in 2016 and dialing in those recipes. So like most of the recipes that we have at our tap room are like the 20th version of that recipe. So dialing in those small percentages by feedback. So I would submit beers to competitions around Canada and get feedback from multiple competitions and then make those tweaks and then brew it again and do that like 20 times and land it on where they are now. So
Jen, Sarah, there are other examples of beers where you are blending malts from different maltsters or even from the same maltster that are processed in different ways in order to, kind of fine tune some of the character in those beers?
Well, I think with the more malt forward beers, so I do an Irish stout. Obviously, that's a little bit more complex, a little bit more malt that goes into it. So I use Red Shed's debittered wheat. I absolutely love that product.
good.
Right? And it doesn't bring any form of astringency to the beer. And then I also use their chocolate and their biscuit and then a Vienna malt as the base, but it just brings a little bit more malt complexity to the product. But yeah, it's all about finding that blend. I don't know. Like to me, it's an art and it's the science. Like I just kind of throw a recipe together, brew it and see what happens. And then if it works, it works. And if I have to change it, I have to change it.
It's like a lot of brewing with love. Right. Like you're just, I'm not going to see how this is going to go. And generally it does exactly what you think it's going to do.
Yeah.
And it ends up tasting like a delicious malt forward beer.
Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely like those a little bit more complex malty beers that you definitely do play with a lot of the characteristics to get them all to come through. And sometimes you just want a small nuance of it. Like you don't want it to be overwhelming. It's just a balancing act. But like I said, we have great relationships with our maltsters and our farmers, so we're lucky to have that connection and like bounce ideas off them if we need to. So
also our water here in Alberta is quite hard, so it does lend itself really well to malty beers. So
there's plenty more ahead, but first, when it comes to packaging your brew, think Heartprint, the original in digital can printing. With 3 locations across North America, the Heartprint team has your back from concept to can. Count on fast turnarounds, no minimums, graphic design support, and rock-solid can quality, all on 100% infinitely recyclable cans. Get 10% off your first can order when you mention the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. Open an account at heartprint.com, HARTPRINT.com, or email info@heartprint.com for details. And Senos, the new leader in AI-driven fermentation, sensing, analytics, and control for the brewing industry, is now taking orders for the most advanced intelligent sensing technology, the Senos M3, the hardware connection into their Senos system. The Senos system platform delivers real-time fermentation control and predictive insights, giving brewers the tools to monitor key variables, detect issues before they escalate, achieve consistent outcomes, and eliminate waste with every batch. The Senos M3 is a modular in-tank sensor that delivers continuous real-time monitoring. The M3 captures 8 critical fermentation parameters throughout production. Turn your tank into a smart tank. Order your Senos M3 at senos.com. That's SENNOS.com. Where I am in Colorado, we have a local craft maltster that is working directly with one particular Czech style brewer to produce undermodified malt, specifically geared towards that kind of decoction, multiple double decoction that they're going to to push that through, to kind of overcome some of all the great efficiencies that modern maltsters build right into their malt from the get-go. Somehow we now, if you want a decoction, we have to go undo all these great things that maltsters have done. Have there any specialized projects that you all have worked on, or that brewers have worked on directly with maltsters in order to produce some kind of custom malts that will achieve specific goals?
Well, I was just made sure I got Shane's blessing to talk about our 24-2 stock ale, actually renamed the brown ale, because I just got to walk into this success story. But one of Shane's pet projects at our brewery is to, there's a local farmer that does all of their farming with horses and old tiny equipment. So he always invites everybody out, but not everyone comes. We've noticed if it's up to them, but they're out there sowing the fields and planting and then harvesting, and then it gets cleaned at a local seed cleaning company. I cannot think of their name, and then it goes over to Red Shed, where Shane works very closely with them, producing the malt that he wants for this recipe, and then we push out the 24-2 brand once a season, and then he'll also do an iteration with a Brett yeast as well. So like we get a couple of turns out of it that come up with very different tasting beers, very special tasting beers. But I sort of think it's funny that the Alberta Beer Awards would put together a malt forward Alberta malt category when we're all almost generally doing that because it's so much easier for us. It's here. But the 24-2 stock ale was its original name, but it is an absolute love child of the owner at Blyman, and he loves talking about it too.
It's true. If you had like an all Washington State hop competition, beer competition, like there's really not much you can't brew that wouldn't fit in that. It's the same here with malt, where pretty much any malt from even any of the major malt stores, or you can get right here. Let's talk about specialty malts. There is an audience for malty beer styles here in Alberta. Obviously, they also love hazy IPA and European style lagers. But malt forward beers are also still very popular in the province. Using some of these specialty malts, especially in this fresh way, allows you to build big malt flavors. Talk about some of the beers, that you make that are, in that kind of, big malt forward kind of space, and the way that they use the malt flavor of Alberta malt.
Yeah, so that's actually funny too, because like when I was talking with Matt one time, he's like, people love to talk about hop selections in beers, but almost never talk about what malt is going into things. And it doesn't make sense because it's an equally important ingredient that we're using. But we started brewing some house beers for a little place up in Edmonton, and they are not interested in super hoppy. They're more European style place. And so when we were developing recipes for it, we definitely were there just to showcase a well-balanced beer, but very malt forward. So, you're constantly putting these specialty malts into something that just will bring that like a touch forward and balance out the hop, that like barely a hop profile to it, because you're trying to showcase all the malts in it.
We brewed a beer together. We made an English porter. It was all Alberta malt. I mean, it's not hard to do. Like most of our beers are all Alberta malt. So, and we used some cherrywood smoked malt from Hammer, which was fun, and the brown malt that at that time wasn't available to anyone else but Blyman.
Well, it's funny. Chelsea said that funny story about when she was first starting out, and Matt was having her trial of his specialty malts, and she had one of the 24-2 malt, and then she fell in love with it. And then Matt's like, well, you can't have it. It's Blyman only. So you just have to come together with them, and they're happy to work on a collab for you. They love that kind of stuff. That's what they're here for.
So I finally got to try it, and it was great.
Jen, are there any malt forward beers that you make where that you find they very specifically pull out an awesome specialty malt character from Alberta malt?
So I'm the opposite of Chelsea. Chelsea loves hop forward. I'm malt forward. I definitely have a few in my my lineup of beers that have definitely been malt forward. Obviously, our pale malty European lager, it's a malt forward beer. You're just getting a hint of the hops. It's all Alberta. Our stout, the vast majority of it is Alberta. Our Cat's Paws Amber Lager we used Red Shed's amber malt, their Kananaskis, and their Rocky Mountain. And I also did the same version, but like I said, a Belgian double, but I use all origin malt for that one with some specialty malts, unfortunately, that none of the maltsters do. So like some special B and some aromatic. But it's nice to see those flavors come through with the combinations that we can come up with.
There's some other, malts. You mentioned chit malt earlier. Chit malt is in the conversation, especially when it comes to something like hazy IPA as a contributor to that haze and overall softness. But you also use chit malt, and I've heard lots of people here in Alberta talk about chit malt over the last 2 days at a much higher degree than I ever hear anyone talk about it in the lower 48. Talk to me about how you use chit malt here from Alberta.
Well, BSG doesn't sell chit malt, so we decided to get ours from Hammer Malt. But I also I homebrewed a batch of hazy IPA that used like 50% chit malt, and it dropped completely clear. So it does not, in my experience, hold haze stability. And after I reread where I read that from was the new IPA book from
Scott Janish.
Yeah, and it did say that it would drop. So accurate.
A little bit is good, and then a lot more is undoes all the
A little
good.
bit is good, I think, for mouthfeel and for head retention. It's a little one bag in every recipe kind of thing.
You'll have also talked about like floor malting here, so there is a maltster that is producing floor malt. Are there specific characters from that floor malt that you find add character or dimension to beers?
I noticed in our hazy is the first time that I used it. Like I said,
What's the maltster and what's the malt that we're talking about?
so the Hogarth floor-malted Pilsner. It was the first time that I used it in an IPA. So brewed the beer and then tried it and then paired hops to it. But I noticed it had a lot more stone fruit character. Same yeast, same everything. It just had like more character in it. And I've read that floor malting can have some files. So I think that is a factor in it, and it's really cool to play with that. And it's a lot of work to make that.
Yeah, I was going to say the flavor is their sweat and tears because we did a Women's Day collab and we used the honey malt from Hogarth, and they had us out. They showed us around. We got to go to work, and I was like, oh yeah, no, this is a very hard way to do this, but it was a lot of fun, and we put out a really nice honey nut brown that year. Totally the backbone of the beer. Like the honey, obviously we put some delicious local honey in it as well, but the malt was sweet and it did what you were expecting it to do. Like you could swap it in for any of the big brands, and it's going to come out exactly what you want and I like better.
You taste Aaron and Alex.
Yeah, their pain because it was hard.
I love this idea that now hazy IPA makers, they have to like go buy expensive floor malts to explore even more file character in a weird way. Are there some specific, unique malts that each of you use that you just have an undying love for, that you find ways to make specific beers from just because you like the malt so much?
Well, the wood-fired chocolate malt. I got the email that he was going to make that anymore, and I was so sad. And I emailed him right away, and he's like, "No, I'll still make it for you." I love that malt. Black Bear, like Jen mentioned, the roasted wheat is just so chocolatey, and I've tried switching it out like in small batches to like midnight wheat, which is the same concept, but this malt is just probably fresher and it just has more of that like ground chocolatey note that I really like. So I incorporate that even into like our red ale and our brown and like any stout that I'm brewing.
I've really enjoyed all the malts that we use. But some of the ones that do stand out, definitely, obviously, the deep bittered wheat, Black Bear from Red Shed. Absolutely love that in our stout. I've used the amber malt in our amber lager. Love that one as well. And love the Melanie from Hogarth for our Saison. Because it's a low ABV beer, so I'm really trying to add a little bit more character to it. And I think the Melanie just does a great job in providing that little extra malty character, and it gives a little bit of tanginess too. So it's really pops in a saison.
Well, I would say too, like we're working on swapping out our ESB to Hogarth, and it is just provides a really nice full, like nutty, very balanced malt for a lot of the base in our hazies as well. Biscuit.
Oh yeah.
Yep. If you're ever hungry and you're milling, that's the one you want to be chucking. So
Who doesn't use?
I know everyone does because it's delicious food for the brewer's brains. So
When we connect the dots between using Alberta malts and selling craft beer to consumers, how do you go about telling that story in a meaningful way? Because, most people, when we look at all of the marketing studies, the idea of local or regional is really compelling for consumers at their level. They are seeking, that's the reason they're buying craft beer from a local producer and not buying macro-produced beer from a large multinational producer. And so the idea of using local ingredients in this local beer that they're buying can be a very compelling argument. Are there ways that you go about, focusing and showcasing that connection between the beers you're making and these locally grown ingredients at various points through the year?
So I'll use an example. I was doing a tasting at Sherbrooke Liquor, and a gentleman came in. I missed him, and I chased him down in the cooler because I'm like, I want everybody to try my beer. So I followed him in the cooler, and he was in the German lager section. And I was like, hey, I'm pouring some samples of some beer. Would you like to come try some? He's like, what do you got? And I was like, I got a German, notice what he's looking at. So I was like, I've got a German Municalis lager. And he's like, I'll try that. So he came out, he tried it, he put back the macro brew and took back and purchased our Municalis lager. And I always make a point whenever I'm talking about that beer. I'm like, it's made with all Alberta malt. Now, typically, obviously, that style would be a German-made beer, but ours is made with all Alberta. I'm like, the backbone of that beer is everything Alberta. I love that we have great producers here that we can create great products. And obviously, if it wasn't for them creating those great products, we wouldn't be able to make great beer. And I just love being able to tell that story because I'm like, it just showcases that we could produce great products here with local ingredients. And people always rave about supporting local. And why wouldn't you support from the farmers to the maltsters to the brewers all throughout that process when you possibly can? So
people in Alberta who are not in the beer industry do not realize how lucky we are and what the amount of barley we produce, the world class. They have no idea. I feel like if you ever in like BC or Ontario is a little bit different, but like they're more interested in knowing what that field of glasses story is. But like in our tap room, we have farmers that come in and they supply the grain that goes to RAR. So it's a big deal for everybody there. That's their lifeblood as well.
And not to mention that Hogarth and Redshed took back-to-back Pilsner malts at the Malt Cup. And that's a couple hours from here. Like, that's crazy.
Do you highlight within specific beers some of that connection, whether that's on menu descriptions, beer descriptions, tell social media stories about this connection?
Our award case, we have that up there too. So like we get our awards, and the very ones that we, like after 10 years, you do have a few things to put up in your trophy case, but the ones that we continually put up are the Alberta Beer Awards. That's important to the people that are shopping in Alberta to see that this is a big deal for us, and we look forward to it, and we want to bring these ones forward. But we've done like QR codes with who brewed the beer and who packaged the beer and where it was grown and what was used and where it was milled or malted. It's very interesting. We all think it's very nerd out on it, and like that's definitely for us, but for the most part, people know that it's farmers around here that are supplying us with our barley.
And I don't have a tap room, so I can't tell people where the ingredients come from. That's why I chase them down in a cooler. But we have it on our website where the malt comes from. I definitely showcase the maltsters who provide us those malts. I have them on our sales sheets whenever we do beer festivals. That information is also out there for people to read and look at. But yeah, we definitely want to promote that we're using local Alberta malt for sure.
We also have local farmers that come and take away the spent grain. They also take our malt bags with them. They'll use them. They have like a little Airbnb on their farm, and they'll chop firewood and put it into the bags. And they also say that some of their guests will take those bags with them, which is cool because they usually say that they're like made in Alberta. And it's just a fun little thing.
All right. So in closing, some advice that you would give to all the brewers out there listening in terms of working with local malt, or even working with Alberta malt in their beers in the future. A word of wisdom for brewers out there, Sarah.
If you don't see something that you want to buy, which you'd be crazy if you couldn't find something, but talk to them. They're so easy to give a spec for and say what your ideas are, and they're happy to work with you because they want their stuff showcased in our beer just as much as we want to have something special that no one else knows about or has. And again, I honestly, designing great beers, we all know that one. And you just swap out whatever, go on their websites and I'm like, what's closest to Vienna? What's closest to Munich? What can I put instead of Carafa 3 Special? That, honestly, you know how it's going to turn out. It's going to be delicious.
Just buy Alberta malt. That's all.
We were just in Yakima last week for hop selection, and we did see lots of those made in Alberta malt bags. So people are buying, maybe not realizing that it's actually made here. But yeah, we make some of the best barley in the world. So
lots of brewers out there around North America are very likely, and maybe even beyond, are very likely using Alberta malt, even if they don't already realize it. Well, that's what we have for Farm to Glass Brewing here in Alberta. Sarah, Jen, Chelsea, thank you all.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode. Hope you enjoyed this look into Farm to Glass Brewing in Alberta, Canada. It's a beautiful province that has a lot in common with the plains and mountains of my home state here in Colorado, and Canadians earn their reputation as some of the very nicest people on the planet. Love visiting Canada. I've loved spending time there this year. G&D Chillers is proud of the cool partnerships they've built over the past 30 years because brewing doesn't stop at 5 o'clock, nor do they. Berkeley Yeast bioengineers ordinary strains to make them extraordinary, enhancing the flavors you want and eliminating the ones you don't. As breweries expand beyond beer into other segments like mocktails and CBD beverages, Old Orchard is here to help. Give your customers a pleasant surprise in their next IPA with Audacia, a descendant of Strata, brought to you by Indie Hops. Looking for a powerful no-rinse sanitizer that gets the job done fast? Meet SantaClean PAA Pro from 5 Star Chemicals. PacTech helps brands stand out while staying sustainable. The Heartprint team has your back from concept to can, and turn your tank into a smart tank with the Senos M3 modular in-tank sensor. I'll be back with another Canadian episode next week when I sit down with Mike Foniak of The Establishment in Calgary. Until then, cheers. This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.